everyone. My name is Brittany Quemby, and I am the Director of Marketing here at HITMC, and I am joined by Jared Johnson today, and we'll be chatting with him a little bit about his recent win for the 2021 Medigy HITMC Award for Marketer of the Year. Welcome, Jared. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Brittany. Always a pleasure.
So, a lot of people may know you in the HITMC community. I know you've been fairly involved over a number of years in a number of ways, but just for those who might not know you, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a fun fact that the community might not know about you.
Sure. Okay, so fun fact. So I didn't go to the first HITMC, but I went starting in the second year, and I'm trying to think if there were any that I missed. But anyway, I've been part of the community for quite a while though, so not quite the beginning, but pretty close, I'd like to think. Okay, so fun fact, I guess I really like hiking and running obstacle course races. So my favorite place to hike is the Grand Canyon. You know, I'm not too far from it, so I actually try to make it back there every year. I do a rim-to-rim hike in the Grand Canyon. It's one of my favorite places to be.
Awesome. The Grand Canyon was on my bucket list actually, and recently we went, my husband and I went, we did the helicopter tour and they land and get to see the Grand Canyon. So I've always wanted to, hike more thoroughly in, but at least I've gone and I've seen and, I've done that so we can work our way up to, hiking more in that area. So it's awesome. And so for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in the healthcare marketing, health IT space?
Yeah, sure. I think it comes down to two words, brand relevance. I like to think I help get people to care about brands, and that's usually innovative healthcare brands. There's a lot of time and attention spent on so many marketing activities that aren't as engaging as they used to be. Maybe they were at one point, but now they're not. So that's what I do right now. That actually comes down to producing a lot of podcasts and other audio content. And I think that's because that's where a lot of brands see an opportunity to get their perspective out there into the world a little bit more. They recognize the value of some long-term branding. And I think that's an important piece of the marketing puzzle, if you will, the marketing mix. It's not valuing it more or less than a lot of your performance marketing, direct lead gen campaigns. It's a part of it, and if it's done right, it helps everything, all of your marketing do better. So that's what I like to think. I'm there to help make a brand become more relevant. I see the need for that long-term brand building. How do you do that? When it's not probably going to produce some immediate results in the way that we'd expect. So a lot of times I'm having those types of conversations as well.
For sure. And I think, as marketers, we see a lot of that from our, executive teams or even teams in general. They do expect those, or they always want those, quick results. But a lot of the time, you can't get those right away. But, putting things into your marketing mix that will help you get some quick results, but also long-term results, I think is way more important.
For sure. It's one of those, it's one of those questions that they just get a lot. So we'll dive into it a little bit here, I think, but
yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure
part of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about it because I think, what you're doing, is helping, people do that. But, if we take a look at your track record, 2020 was interesting for a lot of us and very different for a lot of people. But, as I look at your track record here in 2020, you did a lot in 2020. So maybe you can kind of fill us in on a little bit of what you were up to in this past year.
Yeah, you bet. I definitely put out a lot of content. And when I look back, I think I've landed on thought leadership as a way to try to influence the industry and build a community of healthcare innovators that goes across disciplines. One of the themes that I firmly believe in is figuring out how to get past our silos, and that includes not just within an organization or a certain team or company, but across these adjacent types of industries where we start talking health IT, healthcare, B2B, B2C, health tech, you name it. There are related industries, pharma, we don't even realize how closely we're talking about the same things and ultimately want to produce the same income, the same outcome. So like you can take digital transformation, for instance, right? Like, what does that even mean? We don't have agreement on that. Then you take a term like consumer first healthcare, the consumerization of healthcare. What does that mean? We don't have consensus on that either. We don't have industry standards. We don't have best practices yet, not widespread anyway. So what I've been doing is building this community where that's our single focus to operationalize consumer first healthcare. And of course, content's a big part of that. It's getting ideas out there, not only to say, hey, here's some things I've learned or some things that I think might be right. What do you believe? That's one part of building a community. So I have spent a lot of time, not just the podcast with Healthcare Rap, but I started doing some video series last year. There was at one point where I was, I've been in this position in my career where unexpected things happened to my job. And so I feel like I can relate and empathize a lot with a lot of those who were in 2020 were going through something that they didn't expect. We all heard about so many people who were affected with layoffs or furloughs, and or at the very least, like they weren't like it was a time for probably more people than any time in that I can think of in my career, where in a widespread basis, we were all just asking, like, is this what I want to do and the way I want to do it with my job? So I was finding a lot of opportunities to share and listen and hear people who were coming and saying like, hey, how did you deal with this or whatever? And so I'd end up finding people, I'm like, I don't feel like I have a good answer for that, but I know somebody who probably does. And so I'd end up creating a video series, just doing some interviews with people who I admired and respected. And it ended up just turning, when I guess when you look back, there was definitely, a lot of content I produced and it wasn't a whole lot of written content. I mean, I do put out a lot on LinkedIn and Twitter, but I ended up doing a lot of audio and video content, more than I've done before. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And, I think if people appreciate that too, during a year that's full of uncertainty or, revelation, I think for a lot of people to be able to have a community to go towards and ask those questions and, get honest answers. And like you said, maybe not, you don't have the answers, but there's someone else who you can, bring people together to be able to share with your community. I think that's, I think people were probably longing for that this past year. So,
Sure.
I see a little bit about, and I don't know much about it, but, can you talk to us a little bit about Shift Health and what that brings to the space?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So Shift.Health is an influential thought leadership content network. It's for those who are building the healthcare of tomorrow. It's a hub of high quality podcasts and other audio and video content. They're programs that we feel have kind of leveled up the quality of what they're putting out there into the world. As we all know, there's over a million, there's over 2.1. I mean, it changes every day, like the number of podcasts. It's over a couple million now, though. And so we're at that point where we need some way to differentiate, like what are the podcasts that either have some longevity or have kind of figured things out, and where are some good places that if you don't know about, how are you going to find out about them? I mean, it is not easy to go Google a health IT podcast. Like there's just not a very good resource there for the most part. You're going to get just a smattering of health and fitness and all sorts of other things kind of scattered in there in between. And so it was meant simply to do two things. One, to make it easier to find a good industry related podcast as a listener. And then two, to make it easy for good podcasts to be found. So right now we're up to 25 podcasts in the network, and that includes the CIO podcast and the Healthcare IT Today, the interview series. So yeah, it's great stuff. We're really happy to have these types of programs involved, and it's really just another community. It's we have a Slack channel between us as hosts where we're sharing best practices and ideas on the technical stuff, but then we're also making it easy to to say, like we will share about one another's programs on ours. So, hey, if you like this podcast, you might really like this one. You want to check it out. It's a real quick way to do that, but that's the goal. Make it easier to discover really high quality podcasts.
That's such a cool thing to. I mean, I'm a fairly big podcaster. Not podcaster, but listen to podcasts, I guess I should say. And it's a slew of podcasts, but you're right. When you're trying to find something that actually fits what you want to listen to and fits, your goals in terms of what you want to digest, sometimes it's hard to find some that, make the cut. So to be able to, like you said, make it easier for people to find exactly what they're looking for, that's a great, a great experience for the listeners. And you talk a lot about podcasts, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you also are a host of the Healthcare Wrap podcast. And so can you give the listeners a little bit of insight into that podcast and what they can expect to hear on that podcast?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Healthcare Wrap has been a lot of fun. We share provocative thinking for healthcare innovators every week. I say we because I have co-host Zane Ismail. Zane works in an innovation role for Henry Ford Health System. So he works in the Detroit area, but then he lives in Canada. He lives in Windsor, Ontario. So, so right, like an interesting perspective right there, and that's kind of one of our themes right off the bat. Is our goal is to broaden your view of what you do and how it connects with people in related adjacent industries. So our goal is, if somebody's listening, we hope that they're going to better understand these different viewpoints and the needs of different roles in different organizations. One of the interesting things is there actually is a wrap. There's an intro wrap. It's something that we started. I mean, episode 1, which was 3.5 years ago. So we just passed 170 something episodes, 3.5 years. I mean, it's been a long journey, but even down to episode 1, like we haven't changed the intro itself, which is a wrap. For better or worse, we're never going to win a record label contract here. We know that. But one of the things in it is we
Can I make you do it or no?
Well, the whole thing, I don't know if you'd want to hear that like without the beat, and that's something I cannot do. I cannot beatbox, but there is one line that says, drop the silos. We're all the same team. Patients, docs, nurses, tech, and marketing. Like there's a theme to that, and that's actually one thing that we come back to a lot, is that we can't do this if we stay siloed in our industries. So we've, like I said, with this many episodes, we end up doing a few different seasons. Our last season was season 5. We spent about 6 months on this theme of, is it even possible to provide the consumer experience in healthcare, the consumer's desire? And it was a little tongue in cheek, but it was really meant to shake us loose from these old mindsets of like, hey, why can't we do that? Seriously. From the hospital side, from the health system and provider side, and then from the health IT and health tech side, like what's really stopping us? And then we built on that in our current season, which is how to operationalize consumer first care. Like not just talk about it and say, wouldn't it be nice if, but we're really digging in and talking about a new tool set that we need in healthcare, and that it's across industries, and it's based around human-centered design. It's not just based on managing a platform, an EHR, any other type of patient data platform. That's part of it, but what do we need to do with that? So we have a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, and I think everybody, will have to check those out, because I think a lot of people have that same question. Why is it so, like you said, for the first one, why is it so hard to be able to consumerize healthcare? And then, what are those things, and what can we do to, push that a little bit forward, or what can we implement to push that a little bit forward? So, we talked a little bit about kind of what you do. you are, quite the entrepreneur and the content generator. And we will, in our article, we'll post where everybody can kind of find the content and the stuff that you do. But, what inspired you to start all of these initiatives in the first place?
Ooh, okay, so I'd have to think way back. So I'd say probably the same two things that motivated me to go out on my own as a consultant a number of years ago, to leave a steady job in a large organization with basically a pension, and decide to go out on my own, no safety net. And it really was two things. First, I just love health tech in general. I love to see how it is improving healthcare itself. And so I learned to love and understand like what the promise of it was. And I wanted to see it get done faster. I wanted to see the industry progress a little faster. And I thought, well, maybe I can be a voice out there and contribute to that conversation. So I want to build the healthcare of tomorrow, and I want to see it happen, sooner rather than later. And then secondly, I wanted to improve the system in the name of people in my life, loved ones who I've lost, who I really genuinely feel, if the system was different, the healthcare system, if it was different, maybe we wouldn't have lost them. We lost my father-in-law to prostate cancer 7 years ago, and it is my firm belief it was because he never saw the need to go to a doctor in his life. He was just like, that's not a thing. Like, why would I do that? And the experience itself was such an obstacle for him that unfortunately he didn't ever see the doctor until his cancer, in his case, had already metastasized. It was stage 4 before it was even diagnosed. Long story short, I think we all have a story like that. We have a name and a face who comes to mind of like, why are we doing this? And it's good to just reflect on that every now and then on those days where we're like, oh, like where it's a grind.
For sure. Yeah, and you touched on something that's really interesting, because I think that you said, a lot of people can relate to that. And, I see that a lot in my family as well. And you can put a face to the name, but a lot of it is, men. I find, a lot of the men in my life are, we have to kind of push them to go to certain appointments. And maybe it's an older generation, like my dad or my stepdad, but, they were the same way, where they never wanted to go or had to go, and then once they do go, they might find something that's not, always the best diagnosis. But, I think it's such an admirable thing to be, to leave something where you're comfortable and go out on your own, to try and, push things past the mark that we're currently at. So, congratulations on doing that and being so successful doing that as well.
Oh, thanks so much.
And to talk about the success, so you are our winner for Marketer of the Year in 2021. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the award in general. So I always like to know, I ask basically everyone this question, I always like to know how people felt when they won the award. So, where were you? How did you feel when you found out that you did win Marketer of the Year?
It's an honor. It was something that I felt like kind of stuck, if you will, as opposed to like social media praise, that kind of disappears a few seconds later, where if you're saying something nice to somebody on Twitter or LinkedIn, and like, hey, that's a nice comment, and it's literally gone like within seconds. Like, it's not something that sticks. But this award truly was something that stuck. I thought, hey, this is something like my wife knows, a decent amount of I'm actually pretty impressed. She can act. I asked her, ask her every now and then, like, hey, do you know what I do for a living? It's kind of one of those. And she's like, actually, this. So she's pretty good. But we don't talk shop, in detail, right? She's not in the industry. So this was something that I found her right away. I was at home. I was in between a couple of calls, and I went right away, showed her a screenshot of the award and the slide and everything. And we just kind of got to take that in together. So it was an honor.
Awesome. Well, and we're so glad to have you as part of the community. So to be able to honor you, and for your years of work and also for your support of the community, we were very, very happy to be able to present that award to you. So I'm going to get, a little, personal as we go into questions. So we've kind of talked about 2020, and it's kind of been, a different year, a revelation year for a lot of people. Is there one thing that this past year taught you that you can share with us?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think of something that I haven't heard. I mean, because always the first word that comes to mind is like resilience. We all have a lot more of it than we probably realize. But I think we've heard a lot about that. I think just the fact that this big realization that no one out there has all the answers. So why not come together and share the parts we do know and we have learned, and learn together and improve as a community. That is something that has stopped me at previous parts in my career, where I thought I had to have all the answers, where I looked up to somebody and I thought, they're probably acting that way because they know they've got all the expertise and all the credentials and everything they need. And it turns out pretty much no one does. So that realization that you can't go and say, like, why, even on an organizational level, why is that organization, why do we feel like they're being successful right now? They must have all the answers. Yeah, they don't. They've just figured out a way to operationalize and move forward in a way that they can measure progress along the way. So that thought, like, we should just perish that thought altogether. Nobody has all the answers, and nobody even probably has enough to move forward all the way that they want. Like, let's just take some time and let's share what we do have and see how much stronger we all are as a result.
For sure. And I love that you said that, because I think for a long time, everybody, like you said, thought that they had to have everything, and, oh, we have this in the bag and we know what we're doing. But a lot of the time, it's not always as it seems. And, we need to be able to share with other people to get to that next step. And like you said, it's okay if we don't have it all together, and we can, come together as a community or peers or friends, and, just help each other forward. So you have conducted a lot of interviews, and you had mentioned before that you had spoken to a lot of influential people in your life. If you had to pick a favorite, who would that be and why?
Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah. There've been a lot. There've been easily a couple hundred interviews. Goodness. I mean, like, I guess it'd fall into one of two categories. Is either like, I can't believe they came on the show, kind of like somebody right. I idolized and couldn't believe it, or can't believe how much I learned from them. So maybe I can cheat and give two here then. Like, under the can't believe they came on the show, I'd say Joe Polizzi, who was a lot of people consider him the godfather of content marketing, if you will. He founded the Content Marketing Institute and Content Marketing World. And I mean, he was out there. I've been following him and reading his books for years. And my first podcast, which was Health IT Marketer back in 2015, I asked him if he'd come on that. And I remember he like, I sent stuff out to all sorts of people who authors and people I really respected. And some of them surprisingly did say yes, but he was one that just stuck out because not only did he say yes to that, but then last year when I was doing this Resilience Journey video series, which was exactly that, a series of video interviews of people who can help those who were in a job situation they didn't want to be in 2020. How can you get past that? And Joe was he was like, yeah, you bet, I'll come back and do that too. And then he even recommended Robert Rose, like his colleague, his partner in crime, basically. He's like, hey, Robert will do it too. And Robert came on too. So it means the world when you find somebody out there who you do respect in such a way, and they'll come on. And then, so like I said, if I can cheat and do a second one of like that, can't believe how much I learned from them. I recently had Ed Marks on the show, which my goodness, like, if people aren't listening to Ed's podcast, Digital Voices, it's great. It's fantastic. And the amount I've learned from him, not only a podcast, but like with his book, Healthcare Digital Transformation, he's setting the vision for all of us to follow. And I remember that was one, like, once you, sometimes like you finish the interview and you just sit back and you're like what just happened? And that was kind of one of those. So he gave me so much to think about, and he did it in a hopeful way of where we can go as an industry. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, and those seem like two great interviews, and I'm sure there's many more that you could probably, think of that that you've interviewed. But yeah, I know we had, you probably saw, but we had Ed talk on one of our virtual events, and he was just, such an inspirational person to have and to listen to, and kind of glean, every ounce of what he says out of. So I can definitely see why that would be one of the two.
For sure.
And we talk about these ventures, and you've had many ventures, past and previous, but if you could tell us what has been your favorite part. I know we talk about, getting everybody connected and trying to help, with different experiences and help people within a community, but what has been your favorite part of any of these ventures?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, right now, like where I am, I love seeing a vital community in our industry. I love seeing us come together and try to solve problems collaboratively. I don't see how it's going to happen. I keep coming back to the theme of dropping the silos. If we want a different result in healthcare, we've got to invite different people to the table. We can't expect a different result if we only keep the same people at the same table. So we've got to figure out how to have different conversations. I think that's happening a lot in our digital and in-person communities. So I love seeing that. I love being a part of that, because that is where quite frankly, it's where I learn the most.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's just a vital part of, like, if we are really wanting to change how things happen, we've got to change the conversation. And, in the past, that used to come in the form of, I worked my way up through a couple of medical device companies, in between working for a couple of different hospitals. And I was back like the prehistoric days, it feels like, the early 2007, 2009, 2010, and those years where the marketing team would come, like the marketing leader would come to me and say, hey, there's this new thing called an iPhone. Can you figure it out for us? And like, what do we need to do with it for our marketing team? Is there any business value in it? And so I'd go around for a little while and mess with it, and, we'd talk to my team, and we'd be like, yeah, we figured out something. And then, a few months later, hey, there's a new thing called an iPad. Yeah, and it would happen this way. There's a new thing called Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And it would just keep on going that way. And it was this kind of feeling of like, we're all figuring this out together, but let's get this experimental mindset. And I hope I never get rid of that, because that is something I keep doing. But I learned it early on in these large organizations where we were figuring it out together, and like, same thing. Nobody knew all the answers, but what can we do right now? That's what I see these communities. That's what I see HITMC doing right now. Quite frankly, is all saying, "Here's what I've learned. What do you see?"
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and I think that's that's the beauty of these communities, like you said, and never losing the sight of, we're here to share and to help move people forward in the industry, but also their careers, or to broaden their their spectrum within the industry as well. And it looks like you've had a great career, and probably a long career, different jobs. I'm curious, if you could tell us 3 of the most influential people that you've had within your professional career, and why.
Wow. Okay, that's a big one. Most influential. A couple of people come to mind right off, just because I feel like for somebody to be influential, they tend to be either like a cheerleader or a challenger, or both, kind of like a coach, where depending on the day, they can either put me in my place or challenge me to do something different or better. But at the end of the day, they are rooting for you. Todd Urey from the Pharmacy Podcast Network was definitely, out of anyone who has just freely given mentorship and support to whatever you're doing. He's very patient too. I mean, I first connected back in probably in 2015, and then it wasn't until a couple years ago, back in 2019, when he was the co-founder of Shift.Health of the network, because he'd already figured this out with Pharmacy Podcast Network. So for us to stay in touch all these years later, but for him to support ideas and content that we put out there, that's very meaningful. And then James Gardner is another one who I'd say who's well known now in terms of being an expert in retail health and also doing a lot of great marketing consulting work. But throughout the years, he's been one who has definitely worn both of those hats, cheerleader and challenger. And we all need people like that in our lives who can do both. He's told me when he thinks I'm right and when he thinks I'm dead wrong, and I appreciate both.
Perfect. Right.
And then I'd probably say my very first boss out of college. My very first job was with a public school district in North Texas, and my boss was the director of marketing and communications. And he's like, "Oh, cool! Like you've done websites too?" And I said, "Yeah, I definitely do websites." So he said, "Okay, like you're going to do this and you're going to do our website." And he really taught me the importance of just giving each other a little grace, because I mean I had a lot to learn early on in my career, and I think he showed me a lot of patience. But he also taught me the value of relationships, and knowing that there's no real recipe or career path that's standard in our industry. Relationships are immensely important, and he showed me that early on.
Awesome. And, I think it's great, to hear those things, because, I think it, like you said, it shapes people, it shapes their careers, and you mentioned mentorship, and I think we all can think of, mentors that we've had in our life. And I think, we like to think of these communities as also a little bit of mentorship. You might meet people within here in these communities, your community, our community, who, just gives you, tells you what you should hear, but also mentors you through, maybe the remainder of your career, and you kind of keep in touch. So I think that's also, such a great thing about communities, is that you can meet people within them that you can, have a lifelong, relationship with and friendship with over the years. And, as we kind of talk about, and we're kind of nearing the end of our interview, but as we kind of talk about, the communities, the healthcare marketing or health IT space, we talk a lot about that it's constantly changing. There's always something new, coming down the pipe. What, as we go into new jobs, and you kind of, you've been in a few jobs, and I'm sure other people have kind of done different things in their career, but for the healthcare tech space industry, what is, an important trait or strength that everybody, should have, in this space?
So, what's really unique about this space is how much more important relationships are than a lot of other industries. Like, they're important everywhere, but way more in this industry. I feel like, for the most part, we're talking about long sales cycles. You're talking about kind of a small world. People tend to stay in the industry once they've gotten in. We definitely, you're switching players, or teams or whatever, but like, we're still pretty much stay in the industry or pretty close to it. So you end up bumping into the same people over the years. And the way I think about it is in terms of social capital. For a relationship, it's easy to think, well, what that means, I'm going to think about the things that other people should be doing for me. How do I get those things out of other people? And the more you think about what do I give first, if you think about it in terms of an account, you've got to make deposits into these accounts of these relationships. At some point, you're going to want to make a withdrawal, meaning you're going to need to ask a favor of somebody, or you're going to pitch your services or whatever it is. You're going to make a withdrawal from that account, but you're going to need to have some capital in there. You're going to need to make deposits along the way. So what is that? It can come in so many different forms, but at the end of the day, every minute spent building a relationship and on professional education is important and it's worthwhile. So it's worth the time to understand that yourself and help your boss to see the value of that.
Great advice. And, we'll wrap up here. I have one last question for you. We all learn lessons every day of our lives, whether it's years past, during today, tomorrow, yesterday. Are there, what's one lesson that you've learned in this industry that you think everybody should maybe, learn at some point in their lives?
If there's one thing, it'd probably harken back to something that was reinforced in 2020 for me, which is learning to move forward in a world of ambiguity. And I mean, having a bias towards action and understanding that first and foremost, a situation is never going to be perfect enough for you to wait to do that thing. Second off, you can't wait for answers to drop in your lap before you take the first step. You can't think that things are happening because of other people or other situations. Nobody owes you anything. Your boss doesn't really owe you anything. Your coworkers don't owe you anything. If you sit there, if those are reasons for you to not do the thing you want to do, then you're going to be waiting forever. Like, those things don't change. Those feelings don't tend to change. So it's your job to figure out how are you going to be indispensable to your organization. That's either, the company you work for, the organization you work for, or your colleagues, your clients, whoever it is. How are you going to be indispensable? And then take responsibility for that yourself. I'm not saying everyone, should quit their job because they had a crappy day. I mean, we all have those days, and sometimes last year there were a lot of them. But you can't wait. In the old Wayne Gretzkyism of, he didn't skate to where the puck is. He skated to where the puck was going. You can't wait for the puck to stop moving to take that first step. It's never gonna stop moving in this industry. It's when I first went into consulting, my services involved a lot more web design, web content, web strategy, and now I don't do that for anybody. I'm producing podcasts. I am still doing some social media management, other things like that, but it's going to change. So I better learn. I better be better not understand that. And the best way to say it is I'll quote Robert Rose, who, again, Content Marketing Institute. He came on this Resilience Journey video series, and he said resilience is not bouncing back, but it's bouncing forward. He said he pointed to anything you could think of. He said he said all the innovative things we hear about anywhere were created by people who weren't any smarter than you or me. They just went out there and did it. So that's the one thing I would share with anybody. I mean, I'm a nobody. I don't know anything more than anybody else. I'm just going to go out there and try it. When I've done that, I've been a lot happier.
Well, thank you for that. And you're right. All we can do is try and keep trying, right? And I appreciate I don't know if you did this on purpose, but I do appreciate the Wayne Gretzky Canadian little point that you put in there. I don't know if you did it because I was Canadian or just because you like Wayne Gretzky, but I do appreciate that.
Of course.
All right, well, we are out of time for today. I do want to thank you so much, Jared, for talking with us and sharing a little bit about all of the great things that you have been up to and are currently doing. And we can't wait to see what you do next coming this year and years coming down the pipe. And we do appreciate you and your support of the HITMC community. So thank you so much again for being here with us today.
Hey, thanks for giving me a few minutes, Brittany. Can't wait to finally meet in person.
Yes, I know. It's crazy. I feel like I already know you, but we'll meet in person sometime soon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again. This has been Brittany Quemby with HITMC. Thank you, everybody, for listening.